The night Burkina Faso nearly lost its leader. At 2:17 a.m., the lights in Ouagadougou went out. Not one neighborhood, not two streets. The entire capital plunged into darkness. 3 emergency phone calls were placed in less than 30 seconds. 1 to the Army Command, 1 to the Presidential Guard, and 1 to a phone that never rang. That phone belonged to Ibrahim Traoré. For the next 9 minutes, Burkina Faso had no confirmation that its leader was alive, and in those 9 minutes, the country came closer to collapse than anyone will ever admit. This story did not begin with gunfire. It began with silence. For weeks, intelligence officers had been whispering about unusual movements, unregistered vehicles appearing at odd hours, encrypted radio traffic spiking without explanation, foreign money changing hands in the wrong places. Nothing concrete. Nothing provable, just enough to make seasoned men stop sleeping deeply. The capital had become a city of watchers. In cafes along Avenue Kwame Nkrumah, conversations would pause when strangers entered. Market vendors noticed faces that appeared too regularly, buying too little, watching too much. Taxi drivers reported routes that made no sense, pickups in diplomatic quarters, drop-offs in industrial zones where nothing was being built. The intelligence services collected these fragments like pieces of a puzzle they couldn't quite see, knowing only that the picture forming was dangerous. Burkina Faso was already bleeding from 1,000 cuts. Armed groups pushed relentlessly from the north, their attacks following patterns that suggested coordination beyond what ragtag militants should possess. Every border was being tested, probed, measured for weakness. Drones that belonged to no acknowledged military flew surveillance patterns over strategic installations. And enemies, both those who announced themselves with guns and those who worked in boardrooms thousands of miles away, were watching for one moment of vulnerability. The presidential security detail had been running on adrenaline and coffee for 3 weeks. Sleep schedules were staggered. Routes were changed hourly. Every food delivery was tested. Every new face was photographed and cross-referenced. The head of the Presidential Guard, a man who had survived 3 coup attempts in his career, told his deputies something he'd never said before. They're not probing anymore. They're preparing. That moment, many believed, would come at night. Night erases the advantages of the defender. Night makes verification slow and confusion fast. Night is when coups succeed, when leaders disappear, when history pivots on minutes instead of months. And so, when the grid failed at exactly 2:17 a.m., every veteran soldier in the capital knew immediately this was no accident. The blackout rolled across Ouagadougou like a wave. First, the government quarter went dark, then the downtown business district, then the residential neighborhoods, one after another, until the entire city of 2 million people existed only in darkness, broken by headlights and the glow of mobile phone screens. Backup generators roared to life across the city, restoring power to hospitals, communications towers, military installations, but not at the presidential compound. The generators there stayed silent, and that silence was louder than any alarm. Inside the guard headquarters, one officer broke the stunned quiet with only 3 words. "This is coordinated." His voice was steady, but his hand moved to his sidearm as he spoke. A gesture so instinctive, he didn't realize he'd done it. Phones buzzed against metal desks. Boots hit concrete in rapid succession. Orders were shouted, then repeated more quietly as the implications settled like lead in every stomach. The duty officer reached for a red binder on the shelf, one that had been updated monthly but never opened in a real crisis. The protocol had a name, one that was never meant to be used outside training exercises. Code Shield Black. It meant only one thing: assume the leader is compromised until proven otherwise. The Presidential Guard tried to establish contact through the primary secure line. No answer. A second attempt through the backup channel, more urgent now. Still nothing. A third call went directly to voicemail. And in the command room, no one spoke, because everyone understood the rule that now governed them. If Ibrahim Traoré was unreachable for more than 10 minutes, authority would automatically shift to a contingency council. And once that happened, Burkina Faso would not just face enemies outside its borders, it would face chaos within. At military installations across the city, commanders were making calculations in real time. Do we move forces toward the capital? Do we secure our own positions? Do we wait for orders that might never come? Every decision carried the weight of history. Move too soon, and you might trigger the very coup you're trying to prevent. Move too late, and you might find yourself irrelevant in whatever comes next. Radio discipline held, but in the gaps between transmissions, doubt crept in like poison gas. This was the scenario many had planned for, the moment they had been waiting for with the patience of predators. In embassies across Ouagadougou, night duty officers were already typing cables marked urgent. In foreign military headquarters, analysts were being pulled from their beds to monitor the situation. In corporate boardrooms, where resource extraction was discussed in euphemisms, phones were ringing with a simple question: is this it? If Traoré fell or even disappeared briefly, three things would cascade with devastating speed. First, disinformation would flood every channel. The infrastructure was already in place. Dormant accounts on every social media platform, ready to be activated. Fake announcements, conflicting statements from supposed officials, claims of resignation, claims of death, images doctored just well enough to seem plausible in the chaos. Social media would explode with manufactured confusion designed to paralyze decision-making at every level. By the time truth could be established, the narrative would already be set. Second, fracture. Military units would start questioning orders, waiting for confirmation that never came. Commanders would freeze instead of acting, each one isolated and uncertain, unable to trust communications that might be compromised. Regional governors would face the same paralysis, wait for instructions from a capital that had gone silent, or act independently and risk being labeled a traitor if the government still stood. Borders would suddenly be tested by groups who somehow knew exactly when to strike, when the coordination required to repel them would be impossible. And third, intervention. Not always with soldiers, sometimes with concern, sometimes with mediation. Sometimes with deals offered quietly in private rooms by well-dressed men claiming only to want stability, offering loans to stabilize the economy, offering security assistance to restore order, offering everything except the one thing that mattered: sovereignty. The enemies of Burkina Faso knew one truth that had toppled stronger nations. You do not need to defeat a country militarily if you can paralyze it politically. You do not need to invade if you can simply wait for the implosion and then arrive as the rescuer, the reasonable voice, the only option left. The minutes crawled past, like hours. In the command center, someone started counting aloud. 7 minutes. Then, 8 minutes. The contingency council would convene at minute 10, and once they did, the world would know that Burkina Faso's government was fractured, uncertain, vulnerable. Intelligence agencies on 3 continents were watching their screens, waiting for that signal. At 2:26 a.m., exactly 9 minutes after the blackout, a secure channel activated. Not the primary channel, not the backup. A third line that existed in documentation but that most people assumed was theoretical. No voice, no explanation, just a short, encrypted burst that took 3 seconds to decode. 2 words: "I'm moving." It was Traoré, alive, mobile, not where anyone expected. The blackout had not trapped him. It had forced him to move. And in moving, he had vanished into a system designed for exactly this scenario. This is the part that never appears in official briefings, the part that separates countries that survive from countries that don't. Burkina Faso's leader did not survive that night because of luck or heroism. He survived because of redundancy. The presidential compound was not a fortress meant to withstand siege. It was a decoy, one of several locations he might be at any given time. Multiple routes out of every location, memorized and rehearsed. Multiple safe houses that rotated unpredictably. Their locations known only to a handful of people who changed each week. Multiple chains of command that could function independently, each one capable of maintaining state continuity even if the others were compromised. And because one assumption had been made very early in his leadership, that the greatest threat would not come from the front lines, but from the shadows. The men who had survived previous coups in Burkina Faso's history had learned bitter lessons. They taught Traoré that visibility was danger, that routine was suicide, that the moment you became predictable was the moment you became vulnerable. So while enemies waited for confirmation, while they prepared their statements and positioned their assets, Traoré had already changed position. By the time the power returned at 2:34 a.m., the window was gone. The opportunity had passed. The power restoration happened in reverse order from the blackout. Residential neighborhoods first, then downtown, then the government quarter. The presidential compound came online last, and when it did, lights blazed from every window in a display that could be seen across the city. Not a sign of weakness, a sign of control. We know what you tried. We are still here. At sunrise, Ouagadougou woke up. Most people never knew how close the night had come to changing everything. Markets opened, as they always did. Women balanced baskets of fruit on their heads, walking the same routes they'd walked for years. Traffic returned to the main boulevards, motorcycles weaving between cars with the usual chaotic efficiency. Radio stations played music and morning shows, complaints about traffic and weather, everything normal. And at 8:04 a.m., a short statement was released. The president has concluded security briefings and continues his duties. No details, no drama, no admission that anything unusual had occurred, no explanation of the blackout or the 9 minutes of silence. Just control, demonstrated through silence, more powerful than any speech. The message was clear to anyone paying attention. We do not explain ourselves to those who wish us harm. We do not reveal our systems to those who seek to exploit them. We simply continue. For the enemies watching from their various corners of the world, the message was devastating. The state had not blinked. The leader had not panicked. The system had held. Whatever window they thought existed had slammed shut before they could move through it. And now they knew something that changed every calculation going forward. Burkina Faso was not just lucky, it was prepared. In embassies, the urgent cables were downgraded to routine reports. In military headquarters, analysts closed their files and went back to bed. In corporate boardrooms, the question changed from, "Is this it?" to, "When is the next opportunity?" Because there would be a next opportunity. There always is. The question was whether Burkina Faso would be ready again, whether the systems that held that night could hold the next time, and the time after that. The danger it describes is not fiction, not theoretical, not distant. Burkina Faso stands at a point where hesitation costs lives, and clarity makes enemies nervous. What almost happened that night, what could happen any night, is what many still hope for. Confusion, division, a vacuum that can be filled by those who claim to bring order. And what prevents it is not noise or threats or grand declarations. It is preparation, quiet, unglamorous, relentless preparation. The intelligence services went back to collecting fragments. The Presidential Guard went back to changing routes. The commanders went back to sleeping lightly, because they understood what the rest of the country did not. That survival is not an event, but a process. Not a victory, but a daily commitment to readiness. The night had tested them, and they had passed. But the test would come again, in different forms, from different directions, with different methods. The question now is not whether enemies exist. They do, in forms obvious and subtle, wearing uniforms and business suits, speaking the language of violence and the language of investment, offering bullets and offering loans, both designed to accomplish the same thing: the end of genuine sovereignty. The question is whether Burkina Faso has learned what every sovereign nation must learn, that survival in this era is not about popularity or international approval, but readiness. Not about being loved, but about being respected. Not about avoiding confrontation, but about being prepared for it when it comes. Because the night a country nearly loses its leader is often the night it finally understands what is truly at stake. Not just one man's life, but the possibility of charting its own course in a world that would prefer it didn't. The possibility of saying no to those who are accustomed to hearing yes. The possibility of standing when the pressure is designed to make you kneel. If this story made you uncomfortable, good. History is never comfortable before it changes. Tell me in the comments, do you think Burkina Faso is prepared for the next test? And if you want more deep, grounded African political stories that go beyond headlines, subscribe. Not for drama, for awareness.